Marlowe's on September 1st. Yeah, I hope to see a lot of you there. And let me get ready to say hello to our rest of our audience here. So let me pause for a moment, then we'll welcome all of them in. And good morning to you. Welcome to DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Kroger. We're trying this new thing now. And listen, I'm not very smart, so we have to kind of figure out how to do this in a way that kind of makes sense for me. So we start every morning 9:45 on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. And then around 10 a.m., and hopefully it's right at 10 a.m., but at 10 a.m., we then bring in all kinds of other video platforms. If you gave me an entire, notebook full of paper, a pen, and 3 hours to try to explain it or diagram it, I have no idea how we do that. I don't have any idea how we go from one platform to like 5 platforms. I don't know anything about that. I just keep talking and hopefully everything works out. But one of the things we are trying to do a little bit more is for our video audience, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, everybody like that, when we join you live at 10, we're trying to greet you kind of the same way we would greet our normal video audience, or our DawgNation.com video audience at 9:45. The point here is that requires a little bit of a pause, and it's almost like sometimes you see this on cable news when there's like a big breaking news thing. You got to sort of pause for the top of the hour. This is our kind of version of sort of pausing for the top of the hour. Radio stations have to identify themselves because of FCC regulations. We are not bound by any kind of FCC, intrusive regulations here, but nonetheless, we still want to identify ourselves at the top of the hour. So the point is, we're DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and we're going to start trying to, at 10 a.m., when we go live across the other platforms, say hello to everybody. So I'll be pausing briefly just to do that. I'm sure it'll be a little clumsy on my part, but we're going to try to do a little bit better with doing that kind of thing. So this is going to be a great show. I'm going to take like 1 or 2 more comments here from our DawgNation.com folks, and then we'll start the regular show after that. And if you ever want to be a part of our First and 15 in the comment section, we do there. Just at 9:45, go to DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. It's literally very easy. At the top of the page of DawgNation.com, my big fat face right there on the screen. You cannot miss it. So pop in there and give us some comments, and we'll have a good time with that. Our buddy William Perry checking in to say, go Dogs. Always good to see William here. He says the audio is much quieter. That's interesting to hear. So we'll continue to monitor that, William, and we can always turn it up if we need to. So thank you for weighing in on that. I appreciate that. So we'll monitor that, and we'll kind of see how that goes. And if that's the case, then we want to make sure we pay attention to that. Is it too quiet, or is it just quieter? And like one of the things we obviously want to try to do is kind of keep it, balanced and kind of on par here. So you can give us some more feedback on that if you'd like to. And I certainly appreciate that. I really do. Randy Hall says, in 5 years, Coach McGee, Coach Schumann, Coach Monken will be head coaches somewhere. Interesting how it affects our future recruiting. Hit it now while the iron's hot. Yeah, I think you do. And I think, listen, if you're a coach like Kirby, and we're going to actually hear a little bit about how one of the hires that Kirby Smart made this past offseason is kind of already paying dividends. But if you're a coach like Kirby who's trying to hire the best of the best in terms of assistant coaches, here's the thing, you're not going to keep them forever. These guys have upwardly mobile ambitions, and your idea here is, well, let me leverage that for my benefit while they're here and then shake their hand, wish them well, and they go somewhere else, the way that Sam Pittman did, the way that Mel Tucker did, the way that Dan Lanning did. And that's just kind of the way that goes, is that there's no such thing as being the kind of head coach that's not having to replace a bunch of coaches on a pretty frequent basis, because if you're successful, your guys are going to leave. And if your guys are not hired away to go coach somewhere else, they're probably guys you're thinking about firing. It's just sort of one or the other. If you're a good assistant coach, you just don't stay an assistant coach forever. All right, so that's really good stuff. Jamie Scott also says that he has to turn his speakers up, but Brian Whitehead said the audio seems about the same. So there you go. We'll keep monitoring that. Y'all keep letting me know how you feel about that, because as I said before, a lot of I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully, how about that? Are we back on here now? So that's just a little thing to kind of see if you're paying attention. We're talking about audio issues. We thought we'd just kind of throw in a quick video issue just to make sure you're paying attention, just to make sure you know what's going on. So hopefully we're all good here now. So let me see if I can kind of tap dance for a moment, make sure we're all on board. Then we'll get ready to start the show after that. All right, so it looks like we're good to go. It's Jeff Sentell at UGA Recruiting. Speaking of UGA Recruiting, A.J. Harris. Really interesting stuff from him from Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger this past Wednesday, including some very complimentary words for what I believe is the newest member of this Georgia coaching staff, or at least among the newest members of this Georgia coaching staff. I can't remember who was hired first, but nonetheless, we will give you some of that. Also, I finally am going to get to today something I've been wanting to get to for a couple of days, an amazing moment with Jordan Davis. I'll tell you why Georgia fans should still care about this and why it matters. We'll do that before we're done. But off the top of the program, one thing in particular that Georgia can do to demonstrate the level of confidence it has in Stetson Bennett and why that also might benefit the Dogs on the field here this year there as well. Let's do that right now. We are glad to have you with us. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Boy, yesterday was a really fun day around Georgia football. Got a chance to hear from a couple of guys we just don't hear from very much. You know, Georgia kind of sort of operates on the kind of one voice version of its team. That means we hear from Kirby a good bit. The assistant coaches speak like once a year, even if that, when you talk about a position coach. But when you do get a chance to hear from Dan Lanning, Dan Lanning, oh boy, that's last year. Dan Lanning's in Oregon now. Glenn Schumann, Will Muschamp, like we did earlier this week, or yesterday, hearing from Del McGee, Todd Monken. I think you're like me probably, and you just listen in closely. You lean in a little bit more because these are rare commentaries. You'll hear from Monken probably again at the end of the year, hopefully and presumably in the college football playoff. But this time of year, this is your one chance to get his sort of state of the offense, and then he is going back to work behind the scenes, getting this offense ready to play. Del McGee's a position coach. You might not even hear from him even quite that frequently, but you got a chance to get a press conference opportunity from him there yesterday. This is really interesting stuff. And a couple of the things that Monken said yesterday I want to highlight here for a moment because I do think it gives us a window into what could happen for Georgia here this season, or, from my opinion, what I think needs to happen from Georgia this season. And as a way of beginning our conversation here, I want to start right off the top with Monken yesterday. He was asked a question about Stetson Bennett, and Monken gave a relatively short and relatively direct answer, but in the midst of this answer, he uses one word more than one time, and it's a word that I think matters for the Dogs this season as it relates to Bennett. Let you hear Monken talking about his relationship with Bennett and the evolution of Stetson as a quarterback here in this Georgia program. This from yesterday. Take a listen.
For sure. I mean, being with the first group, being expected to be the starter, so it's invaluable. I think his confidence level is raised with our confidence in him. I think is probably the most important thing.
So Todd Monken there says, hey, as the starting quarterback, being the guy that's treated as the starting quarterback, during spring practice, right now during these summer practices, moving into the start of the 2022 season, that has made Stetson Bennett more confident in himself, Monken says there, and it's also raised our confidence in him. Presumably that means coaches and players and everybody else. They just sort of view him as QB1 right now. Now, we don't mince words when it comes to Stetson Bennett. We believe that Bennett as a player should have and likely has earned that confidence. Stetson Bennett had a good season for Georgia last year. Stetson Bennett was one of the component pieces that helped Georgia win a national championship. And you can look at any number of stats or any kind of array of, data that lets you know that Georgia offensively was quite good last season. They were 8th nationally in points scored. They were kind of top 5 in some of the fancy stat, efficiency type metrics. You don't have to look very far to find evidence that the Georgia offense was really good last season. And yet, seemingly in the midst of all of that, there is still this lingering debate about Bennett, from some fans, but also sometimes from the media, where there seems to be this persistent belief that maybe Georgia doesn't quite trust Bennett as much as it says it does. And maybe there is good reason for that to be true, or whether there is good reason for that to be true or not, it just sort of is what it is, that maybe Georgia doesn't quite trust Bennett as much as Todd Monken seemed to suggest it does right there. And if what Monken actually said really is the truth, and if there is great confidence in Bennett for Georgia this upcoming season, then I think there's a pretty simple way that Georgia can demonstrate that. And I think specifically Georgia can show its confidence in Bennett this upcoming season by simply trusting him more in the red zone. Because for all the areas in which Georgia was statistically great last year, this is one example of an area in which Georgia wasn't great. Now, it obviously didn't stop them from winning the national championship. You all know that I've got the Coke bottle here on the desk that proves it. Georgia is the reigning national champion. So I'm not nitpicking what Georgia did last season. I'm suggesting if you're looking for ways in which Georgia can be better this season, then why not zero in on something where Georgia's not only was Georgia not great, it was essentially like, no better than average nationally in a sport that has 130 teams playing at the FBS level of the high Division I level. Georgia was like near the national average when it comes to red zone touchdowns. Let me give you this quick number here for a moment. I'm going to promise not to beat you over the head with statistics, but I think this was interesting. Georgia scored 42 touchdowns in the red zone a year ago. That's a percentage of 60.87%. That means Georgia scored touchdowns just over 60% of the time and entered the red zone. That was only good for 63rd best in the country. They were tied with Tulane in that mark in terms of the number of times entering the red zone, the percentage of time in which that resulted in a touchdown. That's not very good for a national elite program. Georgia was not nationally elite in converting red zone opportunities to touchdowns. Now, I'm not going to chart the whole season for you because we don't have time to do that, but I'm going to tell you what you already know. If you go back and look at the game logs, and they're all available easily, ESPN.com has every game that Georgia played last season. You can watch the entire play-by-play chart unfold before your eyes. Here's what you already know. Georgia runs the ball a lot in the red zone. Georgia frequently runs it on first and second down, maybe tries to throw it on third down. But there are a lot of running plays for Georgia in the red zone, and I would suggest that one of the reasons why Georgia stopped short of scoring touchdowns in the red zone more than it did last year was this may be one of those places that Georgia just didn't quite trust Stetson as much as it should, or just whether it should or it shouldn't, it just didn't seem to trust him right down there quite as much, because if you're looking for one of the places that Georgia's still kind of a run-first team, getting closer to the goal line near the red zone sort of seems to be an example of that being true. So if Monken is as trusting in Bennett as he says he was yesterday, then why not show that in the red zone? Why not turn him loose and let him throw when the opportunity to score touchdowns is there? Now, as far as that wrestling match between Georgia kind of being a run-first team and the sort of predominant philosophy we assume that Smart possesses, and what Monken, having come from the NFL, what he possesses, and are he and Kirby arguing about this? Has Kirby convinced Monken to be kind of a run-first guy or whatever else? I mean, Monken actually got pretty candid yesterday on his philosophy and Georgia's philosophy and kind of how you meld all that together. And this is a guy that in Monken's case just seems to be very comfortable just sort of saying whatever's on his mind. And I think he gave you some pretty good detail on how his philosophy that he's operated with kind of fits in with what Georgia has done under Smart, but what it's also required to be good right now. So let me let you hear some from Monken on that, and then we'll build on the point after it.
Actually, it's not really a rhetorical question. It's fair in the fact that I do like to throw it. I think people think that I don't like to throw it. And I'm paid to score. I'm not paid to win. I'm paid to add as part of that, but to score. But I'm also paid to be responsible to winning. And so there's a big part of that where they think that Kirby dictates what we do on offense. No, he dictates that we be smart. He dictates that we be explosive and that we utilize our personnel and do everything in our power to win games for the University of Georgia. And that's what we should be doing.
When I hear Monken there, it kind of reminds me of an analogy I've used before. Maybe this is a dumb analogy, but it seems to make sense to me. You like rock bands. You think about like rock music over the years. Like there's a bunch of different ways to be a lead singer. You can be a good-looking dude or a gal, whatever else. You can be a good singer. You can be charismatic. You can kind of be sort of weird. There's a lot of different ways to be a lead singer. But there's only kind of one way to be a good lead guitarist. You just got to be good at the instrument. You just got to be able to play the instrument. And I think the coaching's kind of the same way. There are a bunch of different kinds of head coaches. There are some very serious head coaches. There are some kind of fun-loving head coaches. There are, talkative head coaches, quiet head coaches. There's a lot of different ways to be a head coach, but there's kind of only one way to be an offensive coordinator. You've just got to know how to push the right buttons on game day, and that's sort of what Monken, I think, is kind of getting to right there of, hey, my job is to bury my head in this playbook and find something that works. And that's what Kirby Smart expects me to do, and I sort of get that from him. And then he went into more detail about, okay, so what exactly does that mean in terms of when you run it, when you pass it, and how you meld all these philosophies together? A little bit more from Monken on that point.
believe me, when I'm thinking game plan wise, I'm thinking about how we can be explosive and yet how we can run the ball to help us be explosive. It all fits together. And you can't control the game if you can't run the ball comfortably. You can't. You cannot control the game. You can have a bunch of statistics that make it look better, make you feel better. But if you can't run the ball comfortably, you can't win the game. And that's from a guy who likes to throw it. And my whole background's wideouts and quarterbacks. So I do want to throw it. I enjoy throwing it. 2 years ago against Mississippi State here, we couldn't run it. We didn't run it very good at all. That was on me. We threw for 400 yards, thank God, and we won the game. Cincinnati, we turned it over a bunch and didn't run it nearly as well. Well, luckily, we could throw it. I think the biggest thing is, are you able to, when you're not having success at one or the other, you're not just one-dimensional. You're not just a running team where, okay, we get behind, we're having trouble throwing it, or we're a passing team. Then when we have to run it, we can't. But you know, it's out there. It's part of it. It's unfair because you have to do whatever you need to do to win the game, and that's be explosive and not turn it over.
All right, a couple of things there from what Monken said. First of all, I remember when he was first hired as Georgia offensive coordinator, we went back and sort of dug deep from his past and kind of pulled audio clips from his time in Tampa or from his time in Cleveland when he was not the play caller in Cleveland, but he was, you know, officially, I guess, by title, the offensive coordinator. And some of the things that he said during those 10-year periods of his career, a lot of the audio clips we found from that time are a good bit different than what he said right there. More committed to the run seemingly now than he would have been, going back to some of his time during the NFL, at least based on the clips that we've kind of shared with you in the past. So it's kind of interesting to think about how the metamorphosis might have occurred for him, obviously moving from pro football back down to the college ranks, having been head coach at Southern Mississippi one time before. But beyond that, maybe one day we'll kind of do a little bit more side-by-side comparison on some of that kind of stuff. But beyond that, Monken gets into a point right there that I think is just obviously undeniably true. You do have to be able to run the ball if you want to win. And if you ever want to upset Georgia, if your recipe for doing that, if you're one of these teams that's trying to like play it close to Georgia and get a chance to upset Georgia, if you're not running the ball on the Dogs, then it's not happening. That's one of the reasons why Georgia has this great defensive line, because they're taking away this important part of the game right from the word go and putting teams at a disadvantage because they can't run it. Monken's absolutely right that if you don't have the ability to run the football, your chances of winning the big games, the SEC games, it's just simply going to go away. He's right about that. But that doesn't change the point I was making a little earlier, that if you look at where Georgia has a chance for a value add, if you look at where Georgia has a chance to kind of plus the offensive performance of a year ago, more red zone production, turning more of those trips inside the 20-yard line into touchdowns, that's a big opportunity for UGA this year. And I believe there's plenty of evidence to suggest the way that you turn those trips inside the 20-yard line into touchdowns is by throwing it and not by running it. I want to give you this number from the NFL here really quick. And I realize NFL is not college football, but this kind of data is just far more available when it comes to the NFL. So we're going to assume there's some commonalities here, and it comes from a guy named Warren Sharp, who kind of covers this stuff at the pro football basis. But here's something that I did not necessarily know. Like, close your eyes, think about all the touchdowns you see scored in a Sunday, all these highlight plays, quarterbacks doing, big fancy things. Did you know that 66.3% of all touchdown passes in the end zone in the NFL come from the red zone? 66.3% of all touchdown passes in the NFL are thrown from inside the red zone. 46.5% of all touchdown passes are thrown from the 10-yard line and in, a pretty short throw. More than a quarter, 28.1% of all touchdowns in the NFL that are throws come from inside the 5-yard line. That down there, teams are just feasting in the passing game. And if you look at Georgia last year, turning potential touchdowns into field goals, or maybe some cases not scores at all, relying a little too much on the run, where it's just harder to run in the red zone. Teams are stacking the box. They're not worried about getting beat overhead because there's less field to cover. It's just hard to run it from inside the 20, hard to run it from inside the 10. And certainly as you get close to the goal line, it gets even harder to run it because there's just less field for the defenses to cover. In the NFL, they figured this out. A lot of teams throwing for a lot of success there in the red zone. And Todd Monken says, we trust our quarterback. We have confidence in Stetson Bennett, and he has confidence in himself. I think Bennett should have confidence. He had a very good year a year ago. And I think turning him loose for even more red zone production and turning around a statistic that wasn't very good for Georgia last season, it's a great way for Monken to demonstrate his confidence in Bennett. And it's a great way to see a Georgia offense that was very, very good a year ago take an even bigger step towards being even better here in 2022. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. Glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, whether you're checking in 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that. We can bring that music down just a little bit. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, maybe even a little bit more if you don't mind. You can also find us on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref, as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Podcast kind of all across the board there. Boy, that music's really loud. I don't know if we can bring that down or not. But just glad to have you as a part of the program here today. Good stuff all across the board. Also, big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. Of course, Kroger Chef Jr. back from our friends at Kroger right now. Just in time for your summer planning. Got all kinds of great stuff going on. You can be a part of the Kroger Chef Jr. event coming up on August 13th and the 27th. 13th coming up right now this weekend, but 13th and 27th at select Kroger locations. Each Kroger Chef Jr. is a great experience. It's a 30-minute class. Your child's going to receive an apron and a patch, a chef's hat, a recipe card, and a box, and a pizza cutter, and it's just $7. Can we just kill the music? Can we just stop it all together? I don't know if we have the ability to do that or not, but that's just really, really loud. The point is, Kroger Chef Jr., great way to enjoy some really, really good stuff, and it's $7 per child. You can make a fruit pizza. It's a really fun thing, and it's all available to you online at KrogerChefJr.com. The word junior spelled out, Junior. KrogerChefJr.com for a lot more on that. All right, we've got Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a moment. We'll talk to him about everything related to UGA recruiting, kind of an interesting time. And as a lead into our conversation with Jeff on that, I do want to go around the doghouse here, presented today by our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And I want to talk a little bit more about recruiting, specifically an interview that Jeff was a part of on Wednesday on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, with the highest rated member of Georgia's 2023 class right now. That's cornerback A.J. Harris. And Harris, in the midst of a wide-ranging interview, Harris is a very good interview subject. Just really good quotes, really, really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you should check out the entire thing on the DawgNation YouTube page. I think you'll really enjoy that yourself. But in particular, there was one thing from Harris that kind of stood out to me that I wanted to share with you here a moment ago. One of the things we were talking about on our video comment section before the show began today, we do a 1st and 15 there at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app, where people kind of have comments and we kind of react back and forth a little bit with each other. And one of the things that came up there was the way in which, hey, it looks like there are a lot of guys in this Georgia coaching staff right now who could be future head coaches. And, you're constantly cycling through guys. Dan Lanning gone to Oregon. Mel Tucker before that, leaving for Colorado. He's not at Michigan State. Sam Pittman left as offensive line coach. He goes to Arkansas. That this upwardly mobile trajectory that so many of the coaches that Georgia hires are on, you have a situation where you're constantly needing to replace them. And listen, the true top flight coaches are just as scarce as a commodity as the very best players. There will never be enough elite players to go around. That's one of the recruiting battles that we cover with Jeff are so fierce. Well, hiring the very best coaches, that's always going to be a big challenge as well, because in terms of the truly elite guys, there are only so many of them, and so many of the best programs are kind of fighting over those guys. So in some cases, you're making the obvious hire. You're spending big to get him, and you're doing everything to keep him when you get him. But even with that, there are still a need to go out and hire other folks. And a lot of this ends up being about, can we identify someone that maybe the rest of the country doesn't know about yet? Can we find a rising star who hasn't quite gotten to the top level yet, but we believe is ready for that? That's kind of what Dan Lanning was. When Georgia hired Lanning, he was not a name of note really at all, had been kind of coaching the Group of 5 level, and you see what he turned into while he was here. That's definitely what Trey Scott is. Trey Scott had a very thin resume prior to coming here to Georgia. He'd been at North Carolina, had just been hired by Ole Miss, but at the time, we certainly didn't see evidence that Trey Scott was going to become the nation's best defensive line coach, but at this point in time, he may very well be that. Kirby seemed to identify him as a rising star in a way that which his resume wouldn't have quite suggested there at the time. Well, there may be some evidence that Georgia's also doing that with its latest crop of assistant coaching hires there as well. Think about Fran Brown as cornerbacks coach. This is a guy coming down here from Rutgers who has a lot of ties to the state of New Jersey, but not a guy that I was really familiar with really at all, and I follow this stuff pretty closely. I know a lot of assistant coaches across the country, but Fran Brown was not really a guy that I knew necessarily all that much about, and yet pretty immediately, Brown is demonstrating himself to be the kind of incredibly valuable coach to Georgia's recruiting efforts. In fact, listen to how much praise A.J. Harris, 5-star cornerback, number 30 overall prospect according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team player rating. Listen to how much praise Harris gives Brown as to why Harris ultimately ended up at UGA. This is quite an endorsement for one of Kirby's most recent hires. Take a listen to this.
And a lot of people don't actually know how much Fran actually played a role in me becoming a dog. For me, I would say about 2 weeks after Coach Fran got the job, I'm like, okay, I want to be a dog. Because just the connection that we built, like me and Coach Fran talked every day once he got the job, and that's no exaggeration. He reached out to me every day to make sure that I was a priority. And it wasn't just the casual talk. He actually got to know me past football. And that's something that I appreciate a lot because I'm more than just a football player. I'm a man first. So just the fact that he cared for me past football and he just showed me the vision he had for me past football, the community service hours, to helping the youth, all that really played a big role into me choosing the University of Georgia. So once he got the job, it played a huge role because I already had a relationship with Coach Kirby Smart. And Kirby Smart will always be in the DB room. But just to have another figure like that in the room that just cares so deeply about all his guys and just wants nothing but the best for them and has a vision for us, that really meant a lot to me. Like, I knew I was a dog about 1 or 2 weeks into Coach Fran recruiting me.
So you hear that right there, and you're left with the conclusion that, A, Georgia has itself a very good cornerbacks coach in Fran Brown, but also, B, a guy like A.J. Harris willing to go into that much detail about what he likes about Brown, but also just a very interesting conversation. Really, I just think that's a really good moment from Before the Hedges presented by Kroger on Wednesday. And if you want to know more about Georgia's highest-rated commit thus far for its 2023 class, a lot of that there on the DawgNation YouTube page with Jeff Sentell this past Wednesday. That's really good stuff, and quite an endorsement there of Brown, who obviously is doing very good things for Georgian recruiting, and a lot of attention now on what he's going to do on the field, too, because, listen, opposite Keely Ringo, there's a very important battle going on at the cornerback position. You're also thinking about getting a lot of very talented young players acclimated, maybe ready to contribute for you, like Slim Singletary and Dalen Everett and guys like that. There is a lot going on with Georgia, the cornerback spot, and it sounds like Fran Brown may be just the guy to kind of help figure all that out for the Dogs. Let me also give you a quick update on this. So apparently the music was not too loud. My headphone volume is hearing the music very, very loud. So that is a little bit of an issue. So some of our commenters kind of cleared me up on that. So apologize for bringing y'all into all that, but very distracting. Nonetheless, glad to have you here. Also, big thanks to our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services for making Around the Doghouse possible for you here today. And listen, we love what they're able to do for you because this is a time in which a lot of folks are contemplating making a big move. You know, you've heard about home values being on the rise. You want to take advantage of that. Maybe you've got a place that you want to move to. Maybe you've got a reason you need to move, like a big new job, something like that. Well, when it comes to a decision like that, to uproot your family and go somewhere else, obviously you want to put your trust in a great realtor to help you get that done. That's where our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services can kind of come in on that, getting you the most value with the least hassle when it comes to selling your property, but also when it comes to finding that new home for you and helping you know everything you need to know, kind of navigate that experience. That's what Berkshire Hathaway Home Services is all about. They're a full-service brokerage, got all the services that you need, great agents, great team there together, working hard for you to get you everything you need. That's what Berkshire Hathaway Home Services is all about, whether you're talking about residential or you need to have a commercial need, you're looking for a new building for your business, whatever you need, Berkshire Hathaway's got you covered across all of that. So please make sure you check them out online. It's 29 different offices. It's 1,500 associates working hard to take care of your real estate needs here in the metro Atlanta area and all across the state of Georgia. So please visit bhhsgeorgia.com. That's bhhsgeorgia.com. They'll get you in touch with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. The best time for new beginnings is right now, and they've got you on all of that, whatever your new beginning is. New home, new commercial property, maybe you're looking to invest. All of those bases covered by our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. We're glad to have them here as a part of Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily today. And we're also happy to have Jeff Sentell on board here there too. more from him on A.J. Harris and the other things going on right now with UGA recruiting. Let's cover all that as we go on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll sell it to Jeff Sentell on the road, assisted by AAA. And Jeff, I'll bring you in on the conversation we're just having. Very interesting, compelling interview with A.J. Harris on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger earlier this week. We, in particular, played some of the audio of him discussing his relationship with Fran Brown, which I thought was really interesting. But beyond that, what is your overall takeaway after having spent some more time with Harris, the highest-rated commit for Georgia in this 2023 class thus far? What did you think of the conversation the other night?
Well, good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. I can say this. I went into that interview from knowing Harris and his family for a couple of years now, at least. I went into that interview thinking it was going to be like Javon Bullard, Jalen Walker, Christian Miller, Malachi Stark, that type level of a good interview. He didn't disappoint. I think it was one of the better ones we've ever had on Hedges. First of all, Brandon, this may make you smile on a Friday morning. I was talking to Tamarian Parker, recent Penn State decommitment, and there's stories there. But he told me, he's like, you know what, AJ is basically like the craziest Georgia fan you know that is a five-star and talented and going to go play football for the school. He shared an example that school's been in session in Central Phoenix City all week, and he said he has not seen A.J. Harris once this week not wearing a piece of Georgia gear, a piece of Georgia clothing. He basically wears Georgia 24/7 all the time, representing his future school at his new school right there. And Brandon, this is one of the most, passionate, diehard ambassadors of the class you could ever ask for. I mean, everybody's concentrating on, the names, Tyler Williams, Samuel Mpemba, Hakeem Williams. Everybody's concentrating on those names, Jordan Big Baby Hall, Monroe Freeland, and what Georgia's class doesn't have. And what A.J. Harris says is, man, he just goes, I love our class. I love the way it's built. It's built around people that love Georgia, that want to be there for Georgia, to be Georgia Bulldogs, and they're all great football players. I had a commitment tell me recently. I asked him, who's the guy in the class that you're really happy to see in the class? And he used some spicy language, and we can't use some of that spicy language for such a family quality program as yours. But he basically went on and on about A.J. Harris and how he's such a special player both on and off the field.
Well, that's great to hear. Really good stuff, Jeff. Something else that Georgia fans are watching pretty closely right now is what's going on with Hakeem Williams. Williams has recently dropped his, final list of finalists, but also a commitment date coming up here in the month of September. It'll finally be decision day when it comes to Williams. The perception I get right now is if you get sort of outside the bubble of Dog Nation, kind of away from Georgia fans here, I don't necessarily get the sense that a lot of folks are giving Georgia much of a chance on this, but inside the bubble, it still is a little bit of a conversation. How realistic do you think it could be that Georgia could win with a guy like Hakeem Williams, which would obviously be one of the biggest gets that it's still available to Georgia here in this recruiting cycle? How realistic does it remain with Hakeem Williams in your mind?
Yeah, I think realistic is a good word. Likely is a different word. I'll tell you this, Brandon. My personal feeling here is whatever decision that Hakeem Williams makes on this September 23rd, I don't think it's going to be his final decision. I think he's going to look and see what a school like Texas A&M does. He'll look and see what a school like Georgia does. I just don't think that that's one. And, to be frank, you guys can search anywhere you want on the internet. It's going to become clear to a lot of folks that I think NIL will influence this decision a great deal. We all have seen the reports and heard the stories, and I've heard the stories about how Texas A&M has, not been as robust with those NIL packages as most might have thought with the 2022 class. And I think that's one thing that people will be paying attention to. I think they'll be paying attention to, all these recruits and how great this recruiting class is, and they'll wonder what happens if Texas A&M loses another 4 games this year and goes 4-4 in conference. I think that's one thing to kind of keep your mind on, Brandon, but I'll just share a really quick history lesson as well. That a lot of times, even in this age of NIL where we think we know what's going on, sometimes history kind of just comes back. And, Brennan, at this time last year, I can just remind you, Michael Williams, he was committed to USC. Jaheim Singletary, he was committed to Ohio State. Dalen Everett committed to Clemson. Let me see if I can go on and on. Ernest Green was thought to be an Ohio State lock. Marvin Jones Jr. was not even on the radar at Georgia. Everybody thought he was going to wind up in a place like Oklahoma or in-state, maybe to Miami. It's still, Brandon, it sounds like a tried and true staple, but there's a lot that will happen over the next 4 months. But I will agree with this major point, Brandon. September, end of September, Brandon, when everybody starts feeling good about the Georgia football team, they're going to love that offense. They're going to love the tight ends. They're going to love A.D. Mitchell. They're going to start seeing flashes of the freshman running backs, all the new faces that are sprouting on defense. Right about that time will be a crucial week for Georgia recruiting, because not only is Hakeem Williams going to make his decision on the 23rd, but Tyler Williams is going to make his decision on September the 27th. And people like to fall off the cliff a little bit too early when it comes to Georgia football recruiting, and that will be a week where the hotline will be taking a lot of calls.
Yeah, no question about that. And one of the things we've kind of heard from Hakeem Williams before is that he is looking to see how some of these teams perform, I guess, early in the season in terms of his decision. Now, sometimes guys just sort of say that just to be saying that, but in Georgia's case, can they turn up the offense on the field this year? And whether it's a Tyler Williams or Hakeem Williams or just somebody else, maybe even for some future class, how much can more offense from Georgia? We should point out that Georgia still probably better last year than it was given credit for offensively, and by now that's a sort of well-traveled conversation. But nonetheless, for a lot of these receivers who have taken a very wait-and-see approach to Georgia and kind of kept the program from an arm's length distance, can Georgia do something early to impress these guys, or does it end up being more about, NIL and things like that than what's actually being demonstrated on the field?
Well, Brandon, that's a lot of good stuff there. I think I'll just try to sound like a founding father of the Constitution here. I hold the following truths to be self-evident about the Georgia offense. I think the top 4 pass catchers on the team will be better in 2022 than they were in 2021, especially for the balance of the season. I think Georgia will have a bigger offensive line. I do feel that Warren McClendon, Broderick Jones, and Cedric Von Prong-Granger will all be better. I think if it's Devin Willock and it is Tate Ratledge on the inside, they're going to be able to push and move the guys a lot better with bigger guards. I think Kenny McIntosh has the ability to be pretty spectacular at Georgia all around, catching the ball out of the backfield, running between the tackles. I feel like Georgia's offense, when you get Stetson Bennett being the guy and having the confidence to get all those great first-team camaraderie reps during spring training and also during the fall, and plus the fact that he's going to be a 24-year-old, almost grown man for most of his sixth-year senior season. Georgia's offense has to be better. I think a guy like the remarkable improvement I will see from Brock Bowers in year 2 and A.D. Mitchell in year 2, and then what Mr. Eric Gilbert will bring to the table as well. I think Georgia's going to be more explosive. I think they'll have to be more explosive, and I think this is a year, Brandon. We keep tracking this ratio on Before the Hedges a whole lot. Georgia was very right-handed last year with its defensive prowess of its class. This year's class has to be left-handed. It has to develop a lot of offensive punch, and we still look at the commitment board, Brandon. 4 of the 5 highest-rated commitments in the class. Those are on the defensive side of the ball. It's another stellar defensive class, maybe an all-time defensive class. And you've got to get more of those playmakers on offense. And I think what Georgia will put on the field, what Georgia will do in the box scores, I think it will be very indicative and very refreshing to folks who want to see a lot more offense out of Georgia.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things going on here. There's the thing that contributes to winning, and there's the thing that contributes to recruiting. And sometimes it's what contributes to winning also helps you in recruiting, but not always. Like what Georgia did a year ago is clearly a recipe for winning and winning national championships. But if we're really zeroing in right now on kind of a micro topic of, what's it going to take to win with more receivers like Hakeem Williams or, to a degree Tyler Williams there as well, and that's a little bit of a different kind of conversation. And when, from a Georgia fan standpoint, they simply want to be elite recruiting everything. That's obviously what Georgia's trying to do there as well. And there's no doubt that if you're just going to zero in on receiver in particular, it's going to take a lot more to really stay in the top-of-mind conversation with guys like Hakeem Williams. One of the things we talked about this week a little bit is hey, I think that Brock Bowers may have a 1,000-yard receiving season. Well, somebody else has kind of got to be in that sort of 800-yard range this year, too, about what Bowers was a year ago. Now, yesterday, Todd Monken says he thinks George Pickens could have been a 1,000-yard receiver had he not gotten hurt, and he's probably right about that. That's the kind of talent that he is, but unfortunately, the injury did occur. Well, this year, whether it's getting more out of a 3-star guy or getting a former elite recruit like Dominic Blaylock fully healthy, or a guy like Kieras who's just sort of hung around and, kind of now ready to maybe come into his own fully, or playing tight ends that look like wide receivers. I mean, it's got to be more than just Brock Bowers this year, having that big statistical year if you really want to have the best sales pitch to pass catchers like Hakeem Williams. You already know that, but that seems to be, pretty obvious when you listen to guys like Hakeem and others do some talking, doesn't it?
Yeah, Brendan, and I've always thought through my experience that when you win a championship, it doesn't immediately impact the next cycle. So for Georgia, I don't really think that the 2021 championship is really going to impact the 2023 class. Of course, the 2021 championship was won on the field in 2022. By that point, a lot of 2023 guys have a lot of their minds made up, or at least a little bit down the track, a little bit down the road. What I'm seeing there with Georgia and bounce and oomph is in the 2024 class. I want to make sure I mention on your program right now that the 2024 class, recruiting-wise, offensive-wise, looks downright scary. They have 3 commitments right now, and all 3 of them are electric game breakers. You got the number 1 tight end, you got a top 10 wide receiver who's another top 70 overall recruit, and you got this kid, he's out of Maryland, but he was out of Florida the year before, out of Cardinal Gibbons, and Tovian Mizell, Brandon. I think one of the most underrated parts of his game that I didn't even notice at first glance is, he ran for about 600 yards last year as a sophomore, but he had like 400, 500 yards receiving as well. And that's the type of back, Georgia getting that type of guy that also can run the 4.3, can run a 10.6 in the 100. You really just don't see. Of course, there's some information floating about that he, despite 3 schools in 3 years maybe, it might be able to reclassify to the 2023 class, and that would be a kind of haymaker for the Georgia offensive class in 2023 to get a little bit saltier. But, the greater thing there, Brandon, is you keep looking at all this offense, and I agree with you. I think they do need to have, Brock Bowers around 1,000 yards, and they do need to have a receiver, mind you. I think a receiver somewhere, maybe that's A.D. Mitchell. Hopefully that's the best thing Georgia needs to see. You see a receiver right there up around 800, 900 as well. But I think this year's passing game has the ability to get another guy, be it a Dominic Blaylock or an Eric Gilbert, in that 600, 700 range as well. So then all of a sudden you start talking about Georgia's top 3 receivers with 1,000 yards, 800 yards, 600, 700 yards. You're almost at 2,000 yards right now. And I think the big thing there is Georgia's quarterback needs to get over 3,500 yards passing to where the recruits can really see Georgia and do things a little bit differently. I think a sleeper guy for that along those lines is I think McIntosh can end up with around 300, 400 yards receiving as well, the way he plays the game. And all of a sudden that passing game, Monken being paid to score, that was the big headline this week, of course. The passing game of the Georgia offense, Brandon, it looks a lot more volatile, and I think that's what people want to see and need to see.
I think that's interesting. Frank Patterson on YouTube wants me to ask you more about Tovian Mizell. Did I hear you say the latest commitment to Georgia, the 2024 running back, there's a chance he could reclassify as a 2023? Can you tell me more about that, and then maybe just a little bit more about him as a player in general?
Yeah, so Georgia currently taking 2 backs. We remember the 2025 commitment a while back as well out of Pennsylvania. But, Mizell's a kid that, he's a guy that, Cardinal Gibbons likes to throw the ball around a lot. That type of program they always had. You always look at their teams, and they have a lot of electric, 3,000, 4,000 yard passers. But they got a sophomore running back, almost 400, 500 yards receiving. And, despite the fact that he's transferred a couple of times, and Brendan, he's in the weight room, he's weightlifting championships, powerlifting championships, track championships. He ran a 4.30 laser in the rivals camp. I don't know if he's that fast on film. He doesn't play that fast on film yet because he's just a budding sophomore. This will be his junior year, but he's been timed at 10.56 before an injury, a hamstring, and then he was at 10.94 on a recent workout in the 100. And he's already over 200 pounds, Brandon, and that's what Georgia going to take it back. That's over 200. They like their backs to have some meat on their bones and to bring power through the holes. And there is some talk. There is some discussion. Now, that golf ball is not on the green yet. That golf ball is probably, halfway down the fairway right now. But there's the thinking that they might try and kick the tires on whether or not he can reclassify and get it done. Of course, that means a lot of extra classes. Reclassification would not come with an early enrollment. Reclassification would come with a May enrollment, mind you. But there's a chance that he could put in the work in the classroom if he chooses to, Brandon. That is a very daunting proposition, and for a lot of families, it's also kind of expensive to get all those credits and to take all those online courses. There is a chance, I would call it an outside chance, that he might be a guy that comes in late May, like an Andrew Paul or a Branson Robinson, that could be a May, June enrollee in 2023, and all of a sudden, running back stuff with 2023, the backs you didn't get, the backs you wanted to get. If you drop a talent like Sylvani Mazel in there, all of a sudden you've got a big-time running back in the 2023 class.
I want to ask you about a story that you wrote at DawgNation.com this week about a guy you and I will actually get to see in person coming up in a few days. Before that, though, let me remind you that we're on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today. Of course, we appreciate all the things that AAA does for us, including getting your home insurance through AAA and taking advantage of some of the great features and benefits that come your way because of that, including the disappearing deductible. You love the idea of that. Your deductible is going to be reduced by $50 for every year that you can go claim free, up to $500. It's one of the many options offered when it comes to AAA and their home insurance. So make sure you check them out online, AAA.com/home insurance. That's AAA.com/home insurance. Or call 833-718-2075. That's 833-718-2075. So, Jeff, you had a great story the other day about Lawson Lucky, tremendous tight end prospect on his way to the University of Georgia. Big legacy to the Dogs, also to that Norcross program. You and I are going to work together for the Brookwood Norcross game next Saturday in the Corky Kell Classic inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But for a Georgia program that's gotten very used to having the best tight ends in the country as both recruits and as players on the field, Lawson Lucky sort of feels like that next one, doesn't he?
He does, Brandon. And one of the things we try to do there is, one of my missions is I'm not just going to write about the commitments and the targets and the guys. I'm not going to let the big-time commitments go 4 or 5 months without seeing a byline on DawgNation or updates or really, really big stories. And, when I looked around at Lawson, I've been watching him for a while. And here's the thing, Brandon, I'm totally honest. There's no way there's 3 tight ends. There's no way there's 2 tight ends in the state of Georgia right now in 2023 that are better than Lawson Lucky. And there's a misconception out there that, Lawson Lucky's just going to be this brawler. He's going to be a street fighter. He's going to play some H-back. He's going to play some fullback. He's going to put his hand in the ground. He's just going to maul people. He's going to be that grinder, that, club bouncer that's going to seal off the edge for a lot of things for Georgia to happen in the passing game and the perimeter passing game and then outside run. It's really not that at all, Brandon. It's totally wrong. When you look at Lawson and what he can do, there's a confidence there that he could even play receiver. There's a confidence in there, and he even expressed it when I started talking to him about it. He does feel that there's a misconception about him. They don't know what he can do. Maybe he's not in the most tight end showcase offense at Norcross, but he came out and said it, Brandon. He's like, dude, I don't want to sound cocky. I don't mean to sound cocky by this, but I think I'm the best receiving tight end in the country. And that was a headline. That was something that I think folks needed to know, that they're getting a lot more. I think Lawson Lucky was probably the most misunderstood commitment in the Georgia 2023 class right now, because the DawgNation as a whole doesn't know what they're getting in Lawson Lucky. And I thought it was very interesting. That story comes out, and the all-time one of the GOAT of GOATs receivers at the University of Georgia, Terrence Edwards, basically doubled down on it. He says that Lawson's route running, the way he moves, the way he comes in and out of his breaks, the way he runs his routes, some of the best he's ever seen at the high school level. You've got a guy there that everybody thinks that Lawson's just going to be that get in the dirt and grind guy, but he's really going to be a tremendous asset in the passing game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was saying this to our video audience earlier. It's kind of an interesting coincidence that as Georgia has become this great tight end program, and a lot of the guys they have brought in to be that are out-of-state guys. Bowers from California, Darnell Washington from Nevada. Think about all the great tight ends, though, that are currently in the state of Georgia. I think it's probably the deepest position in our state here for the class of 2023, and one of the best players, regardless of position, in the class of 2024 is a Georgia tight end commit, also from the state of Georgia here down there in Colquitt County. But between Ethan Davis at Collins Hill and John Thurman at Langston Hughes and obviously the big guy up in Rome. I mean, like, they're just good tight ends across the board. It's really amazing how deep the state of Georgia is when it comes to very good tight ends right now. And obviously Lucky, whose dad and brothers all played for Georgia, he's a big part of that too. But this is a very deep position for our state at the moment.
Another thing you got to remember, Georgia's other tight end commit, Brandon Pierce Sperling III, we wrote about him this week. He grew up in the Walton district. He grew up in the Walton community football program, and until he moved to beautiful 30A to spend his high school years looking at those beautiful beaches and those emerald waters. He was, a Georgia tight end as well. He's going to be a third-generation dog. I love that story we wrote about Pierce this week. How we got to, I got my fingers and toes out on that one, Brandon. I calculated Pierce Sperling commits in September of 2020. But that was before Stetson Bennett ever started a game for Georgia. Man, has a lot changed since then. And there's actually been 63 other Bulldogs commit or sign with Georgia.
Wow. Since
Pierce Sperling III committed to the Dogs way, 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 way back in September of 2020. And this is a guy, I love this story. I didn't even know this detail. Some readers pointed it out to me after publication. I think it was a gentleman on Twitter by the name of Randy Wolf, something like that. Hopefully I got your name right there, sir. But he remembers Pierce Sperling as climbing trees at the tailgate at Sanford Stadium every Saturday before everybody went in to watch the Dogs play. And kind of the way we started things on the topics today, Brandon, A.J. Harris is one of those fanatical Dog fans that happens to be a five-star corner. And then Pierce Sperling, another guy that went to those middle school Kirby Smart camps and were shaking Kirby's hands at midfield, being MVPs of the camp. This is another guy that somehow you cut him, he probably bleeds Georgia red and black. He's probably got a great Munson impersonation, and yet he's an All-American, the number 2 tight end in the country going to play for Georgia.
Jeff, that's really fascinating stuff. Thanks for being here on the road, assisted by AAA here today. We'll look forward to reading a lot more recruiting stories from you at DawgNation.com and, of course, chatting with you back here on the program, on the road, assisted by AAA, again, very soon there as well.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. Everybody be safe out on the road this weekend. We'll see you next week.
All right, good stuff there from Jeff Sentell. We'll kill the SEC through music here today if you're just joining us. Had a little bit of an issue with the audio mix in my headset, so I was hearing this music very loud a little earlier. Apparently the audience was barely hearing it at all, so as a way of keeping me from being distracted and trying to figure out what's going on and what's not, let me just not do the SEC through music today. But nonetheless, even sans music, we'll still say hello and cruise around the SEC courtesy of our friends there at Royal Caribbean. And what a great time it is. Take advantage of that great savings opportunity that's still out there when it comes to Royal Caribbean. And act on this right now because it's about to go away. I'm talking about your chance to take advantage of kids sail free, 30% off all cruisers. That opportunity is available for you right now, but it's about to be gone. So make sure you take advantage of that. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority can help you at tcava.com. That's tcava.com. You can also give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. We think a good travel agent can help you make the right decision with the best Royal Caribbean cruise ship for you, because the various cruise ships, go to different places and they have different specialty restaurants on board and, different entertainment experiences. And in some cases, there may be one that's more perfect for you than the others. And so we want you to find that out. Maybe, speaking of perfect, you want to make sure you're going on an itinerary that includes Perfect Day Coke OK. Well, who wouldn't want to do that, first of all? Once again, a great travel agent can help you out with that. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority included. So this is the time to make your decision about when you want to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship as we head towards fall of 2022 or think about early 2023. I've got 2 on the books for myself coming up here very soon. And I'm excited about both of them after the season is done, of course. Job first, then play second. But nonetheless, it is going to be a great time. And our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority can make sure that's true for you there as well. So find them, take advantage of great savings, and get booked up on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here today. All right, so we have a very interesting story coming out of the SEC. And obviously this portion of the year, we would usually never talk about basketball at all, unless something happens kind of like this. Have you seen what's gone down with John Calipari at Kentucky? So Calipari is lobbying to have a new practice facility built for his football program, or I should say his basketball program. And in the midst of arguing for why this should be done and trying to convince those that control the purse strings there to open up and give him what he wants, he says, we here at Kentucky are a basketball school. He says Georgia's a football school and Alabama's a football school, but we are a basketball school. Then he kind of gave a little bit of a, I guess, concession in the direction of Mark Stoops. Hope they win 10 games, so they go to a bowl, whatever else, but we are a basketball school, essentially insinuating that basketball should get whatever it wants. Now, the football folks over there have gotten very upset. Mark Stoops has spoken out publicly about this. Some former players have kind of spoken out publicly about this, and this is one of those rare moments where there's a pretty big level of infighting going on within the program. Some folks are lining up behind Calipari because Kentucky kind of is a basketball school, and they want Calipari to get whatever he wants because they want the basketball team to do well. There are some folks who kind of want Kentucky to be good at football too, and they're like, hey, Calipari's totally undercut the Wildcats' recruiting efforts because, honestly, that's the most common negative recruitment tactic that probably gets used against them. Do you really want to go to Kentucky? That's a basketball school. When you get the basketball coach stepping up and saying this and kind of belittling the football program in the process, then all of a sudden that makes the job of Mark Stoops that much more difficult to do. Now, I find all this to be pretty fascinating because this is real and it is raw, and you don't have to go very far on social media to find a lot of Wildcats fans really at each other's throats over what Calipari said here. And for me, what it kind of re-ups is something I've said before. I think I'm a pretty big sports fan. In addition to being a Georgia football fan and the stuff we do here on DawgNation Daily, I'm sort of just a big sports fan in general. I try to follow all sports. I don't follow them as closely as I used to because I am so entrenched into DawgNation and the SEC and football and everything like that. But I just have always been a sports fan. So I have a lot of opinions about a lot of sports. And here's the one thing I always think about when I think about Kentucky basketball. I think being a Kentucky basketball fan is the single most miserable experience of any sports team you could cheer for. I don't know that any fandom is any less rewarding in recent years than what it has been to be a Kentucky basketball fan. Y'all, they don't win anything. Now, they recruit amazing every year. They had a long stretch of being either number one or number two in recruiting year after year after year, essentially them and Duke. They have an elite recruiting class coming in again this year. A lot of those guys who've come through the Kentucky program, the recent years' worth of one and dones, they've gone on to the NBA. Many of them had great success there. In fact, there are a lot of Kentucky players in the NBA who are way better in the league than they ever were there at Kentucky. And John Calipari doesn't seem to be bothered by this at all. He seems to be more than happy with his program being a little more than just a stopover for players on their way to the NBA. And listen, we're not against players and their professional ambitions or anything like that. But if you're a Kentucky basketball fan, like, how much joy do you get out of that? Like, how much enjoyment do you get out of watching your players come through your program, seem half interested, half paying attention, poorly developed from a fundamental standpoint, yet going on to the NBA, having great success, and you get to brag about that, I guess. But what about what they did while wearing the big blue uniform in recent NCAA tournaments, including losing in the first round of St. Peter's this past year? There hasn't been much to brag about. And then Calipari goes so far as to basically undercut the football program because he's got even more that he wants, as if he hasn't already been given enough resources. This is a guy who's had his previous accomplishments essentially erased. Final Four trip, at Memphis, taken away from him. Final Four trip at UMass, taken away from him because of all kinds of NCAA alleged improprieties. That's kind of the background for John Calipari. This is supposed to be the place where he establishes himself as one of the all-time greats. It's not really happening. And I say that as a guy who's had respect for Calipari in the past, but results have to matter at a certain point in time. So on this particular issue, I sort of find myself siding with the Kentucky football folks who are saying, who is John Calipari to be saying something about us after the early exits he's had from the NCAA tournament as of late? Yes, Kentucky is as regal a basketball program as you can ever imagine, but on a yearly basis, the football team still generates more revenue because football is just more popular than basketball across the board. Kentucky may be a basketball school, but football still, for the most part, does more to pay the bills, especially compared to the relative cost of the two programs because of how much Kentucky spends on its basketball team. So in this particular case, count me among those who think that John Calipari is a little out of line, and he should probably shut up all the way around until he starts winning a few more games that matter in the month of March. I saw where Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU quarterback, it's like a relatively young, seemingly talented guy, hasn't played a ton. One of the guys may be in competition a bit. I mean, it's mostly thought to be a Jaden Daniels, Miles Brennan competition to see who the LSU starting quarterback is. But they did have a scrimmage yesterday. Kind of weird, I think, to have one on a Thursday, but nonetheless they did. And Nussmeier apparently did not participate because of a little bit of an injury situation there. So I bring this up because of kind of what we said yesterday, which is talented teams who have an unknown commodity at quarterback. One of those teams probably figures this out, whether it be A&M or whether it be LSU or whether it be Florida, or even, I wouldn't even completely eliminate Auburn from this discussion. One of these teams that has a relatively high level of talent, if you can find quarterback, that's a team that could become pretty dangerous. And of the 4 schools I just mentioned, the odds are one of those teams will either have a pretty record or be at least a little bit dangerous in some of the games that matter. But in the case of LSU yesterday, one of the quarterbacks who's, to a degree, maybe in that competition. And at a certain point, you kind of wonder, well, if he's not competing yet, then when is he ever? And that's been kind of an issue for a lot of quarterbacks at LSU. The maturity, the blossoming just sort of never seems to happen. But for Nussmeier, we'll find out once he's back healthy again what he's able to do to kind of contribute to some of that. I saw where Jerry Palm, who's kind of one of those long-time, like he's not really an analytics dude, but he's been kind of doing numeric-based college reporting forever. I'm talking about early days of the internet. Was it called college? He used to do basketball stuff like College RPI or did collegebcs.com for a while. Now he works at CBS, and he's got his projected college football playoff. His top 3 are exactly what you think they would be. Georgia in the playoff, along with Alabama and Ohio State. The 4th team for Palm, though, is the one that I mentioned the other day. I told you before that I am semi-interested in taking a little bit of a flyer on Oklahoma to make the playoff, maybe more so than a team like Clemson. Jerry Palm's got them in his playoff there, too. And it's also worth pointing out here that the 2 playoff games really matter. The one semifinal game way out west in Arizona, the next semifinal game right here in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl. So we've said this before. This is one of those years for Georgia. It's more than just being in the playoffs. Seeding matters. This would be a very good year to go 13-0 because if you're not, if it's Alabama who's the 13-0 team, that means that you're going to Arizona for the semifinal game, coming back home, continue your preparations, and then going back out west again to play in L.A. It's a little bit of a tricky scenario for the team that has to do that. So last year we saw both SEC teams make the college football playoff, Alabama and Georgia. The result of the SEC title game ended up not mattering very much. But this year, that result probably matters a little bit more because even if it is easy to rubber stamp Georgia and Bama into the playoff, as Jerry Palm from CBS has done here, seeding is going to matter. And being the best team, playing in Atlanta, presumably the number 1 seed, would get their chance to do that. Way better than having to go to what might end up being 2 West Coast road trips if you want to win the national championship. I remember 2017. That was a big deal for Kirby because that year there was only 7 days between the semifinal game and the national title game. Georgia being out in California, I think that was something that they were a little bit concerned about, getting home as quickly as possible, getting ready. Not an excuse because Kirby's not like Saban. He doesn't make a constant stream of excuses. But I do think they wanted to get back from California as quick as they could back then because that West Coast travel is a pretty big deal. And for one team this year, you may be asked to travel east to west a couple of times, and that could be a little bit of a challenge. And just looking at the Jerry Palm piece at CBSSports.com made me think more about that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, there is something here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger that I've been wanting to get to for a couple of days. We just haven't had time to. So there was a great video the other day, which you've probably seen by now, of Jordan Davis talking about winning a rep. This is more than winning a rep. If you're watching a video, you can see this. It was captured by a guy named Rich Bussey on Twitter. And Davis is just mauling some dude. And this guy, I don't know who it is. Maybe y'all do. He's trying to plant his legs. He's trying to get a wide base. He's trying to bring an end to this humiliation. And Davis is just unbothered by the entire thing. I mean, he could have pushed him all the way back down to Mallard Creek. I mean, this is a guy that's just absolutely mauling guys at the NFL level, much the same way he did for most of his senior season in college here, too. And the video's gone viral. It's been shown a million times. You've probably seen it by now. But the thing that was so remarkable to me about the entire ordeal was the level of humility that Davis showed about it. He's in a big city now. He's in Philadelphia. There's a lot of media that covers the Eagles. That's a big deal up there. And coming in southeastern Pennsylvania, making a name for yourself up there, it's easy to imagine a lot of rookies might want to do that. And they might like the idea of being bragged on a little bit as a way of, getting some attention for themselves. But in Davis's case, he's the same humble guy up there getting paid a bunch of money in the NFL as he was down here at Georgia. And it's really remarkable to hear how he kind of just sort of begs off of the whole thing and really lets it be known that he is not a fan of this viral video that everybody's seen now. This is so good from Jordan Davis. I didn't want the week to end before we played it. This is Davis from up in Philadelphia.
I hate it, honestly. I just feel like it shows it's very one-sided. You see one rep, but you don't see Cam just, blocking me and, getting me at practice and, getting me in the other reps. So, I always say, looks can be deceiving. So, one rep and it goes viral, whatever, whoop-de-whoop. But, Cam is holding his own. He's a very good player, and it's just good competition. It's iron on iron. So, you see the background of everything, but don't let the hype get to you.
Two things from me on this. Every moment we spent promoting JD to NYC, Jordan Davis to the Heisman Trophy, every moment we spent doing that was a moment that was well spent. If there is anybody ever that deserves to be a first-round pick, if there's such a thing, or deserve national attention, he didn't get the Heisman, but he did get the Bednarik and the Outland Trophy. If anybody ever deserved that kind of thing because of the way that he carries himself, clearly Jordan Davis is just one of those guys. And that clip tells you everything you need to know. Totally deferring to a teammate, being excessively humble, did it a million times here at Georgia. And I am so glad we hyped that guy up as much as we did, because guys like that ought to be getting more attention and as much attention as possible. Here's the second thing. That kind of stuff is not easy to cultivate in a team. And yet when you listen to the Georgia coach, we've heard from 5 different Georgia coaches this week thus far, if you count Kirby Smart, over the course of the last week, I should say. If you count all those up, we've heard from 5 different Georgia coaches. And one of the themes that comes up over and over again are guys playing together, guys being good teammates, guys working and being cohesive and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's so easy for that to kind of go in one ear, not the other, because it just sort of sounds like the kind of thing a coach is supposed to say. But is there any denying that made Jordan Davis special, because he did have a lot of that last season? And is there any denying that finding a way to kind of get that back again this year is obviously very important for Georgia? That sort of team-first mentality, that sort of, big team, little me, putting my own accolades underneath the accolades of the team. Clearly that worked for Georgia before, and finding that again is obviously something you'd want to try to do. But when you hear Davis do that kind of thing, deferring to a teammate as effortlessly as he does, it is very easy to remember, or maybe easy to forget, I should say, that kind of stuff just does not come natural for everybody. And kind of finding that selflessness that creates the perfect team environment, Georgia obviously trying to conjure that up this year, much the same way that Jordan Davis had that for the Dogs in the past. And with that said, we'll get ready for our big finish here. We do it each and every Friday, presented by the Finish Long Drink. It's a chance to celebrate some of you who are enjoying yourself some Finish Long Drink. And I always love to see this, because honestly, I like to see our audience having a good time. We around here want to have a good time, and the Finish Long Drink is certainly a part of all of our good times. We want you to have one there too. So as we head towards the weekend, and the Finish Long Drink is seemingly made for the weekend, as we head towards the weekend, let's celebrate some folks having some fun with the Finish Long Drink. We'll show you our first example of this. How about our buddy Seth Rhodes? And I told you before, the long drink is available at a lot of golf courses. You see it just a lot of golf courses all the time. I was at East Lake the other day, even a big fancy course like East Lake. Finish Long Drink right there, and everybody's enjoying that up there too. And Seth Rhodes checks in on Twitter to say he's enjoying a Finish Long Drink while working on a short game. So a nice-looking shot there of Seth getting some work in at the driving range. And I also got the Finish Long Drink parked next to that. Looks like Seth's having himself a great time, and I love to see that. Seth, thank you so much for sharing that. Also, going back to Monday, a lot of you remember that we had a little bit of an issue on Monday where my Wi-Fi just completely disappeared on me. Yeah, there you go. I'm just burning up in the heat. Wi-Fi disappeared. I had to step outside while wearing a suit and tie. I was at the Corky Kell kickoff luncheon. And John Stinchcomb, we were doing the interview with John, of course, the great former Georgia All-American. And when I dropped out, John essentially had to kind of keep the ball in the air, or at least he helped us out choosing to. Could have just hung up the phone himself if he wanted to. But he chose not to and kind of kept the show on the air, which we were incredibly grateful for. So one of our commenters on the show at DawgNation.com said that John should get free Finish Long Drink for life for what he did. Well, I don't have the power to extend free Finish Long Drink forever to John Stinchcomb, but he certainly deserves himself at least a good old cold can of the Finish Long Drink for the way that he took good care of us on Monday. And hopefully you get a chance to enjoy some of that yourself. Maybe even pick up one of those 8-can variety packs, because it includes 4 different Finish Long Drink varieties. You get 2 cans of each of that. If you want to go to longdrink.com, you can find out more about where to pick it up and the different choices that are available to you and kind of how you can get some. Just put in your zip code there and you can find some that's near you. Long drink cranberry, long drink strong, the long drink zero, no carbs, no sugar, long drink traditional, which is grapefruit flavored, gin kick. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail. Looks like a beer, but it's a ready-to-drink cocktail right there in a can, ready to enjoy, easy to just have a great experience with. So check out the Finnish long drink for a lot more on that. All right, the risk of kind of blowing out my ears because my headphone volume is all messed up. Let's fire up the fight song and let's finish the show here for today. All right, so we will give you out a golden shoe here today there as well. Always having a good time doing that. We talked some Stetson Bennett off the top of the program, so let's do a Stetson Bennett themed golden shoe on the way out the door here. And once again, a member of our audience showing a good bit of creativity here. Bark a lot on Twitter. Robin checks in to say, BA, I created a little golden shoe for you after listening to the show today. Hashtag Stetson for Heisman. And it's that picture of Stetson showing the first day of school meme thing that the players did the other day, except it's the sign turned into a Stetson Bennett with the Heisman Trophy. And Stetson's sort of air quote here says, okay, I delivered, so why not me? And I think that sounds like a very good idea. Why not Stetson Bennett? Trust him in the red zone. Let him throw the football. Turn some field goals into touchdowns. And maybe Stetson Bennett could really be on his way to New York for that Heisman Trophy celebration as a Heisman Trophy finalist. Good stuff, Barkalot. Golden shoe winner for you for today. How about our Gator Hater Updater? 4,964 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have won a national championship. And our Gator Hater Countdown, Dogs back in Jacksonville, 78 days from right now. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that today. We are not going to go crazy long on comments because I got a lot of stuff I got to do. So I apologize for that, but we'll have a good time with you, and we hope you're all doing well. I'm going to start on DawgNation.com first here today. We'll do a couple there and then bounce around the other comment sections here for a moment. Keith Finney says humility comes before honor. I would agree with that. Brian Whitehead says there's a reason why JD is an honorary redcoat. I'd agree with that there too. Senior Dog 54 says the video of Jordan Davis's child abuse. I mean, it's amazing to think. I mean, if you saw him pushing me around that way, you'd say, well, of course that's true. But this is another NFL player trying to make a name for himself during a training camp, and Davis is just mauling him, which is really wild. Keith Finney says when you're compared to Nick Chubb, that's saying a lot in itself. I believe that's a reference to Branson Robinson, who is getting some of those comparisons, even from Del McGee yesterday. Pretty interesting stuff. Keith Finney also bringing up Dejon Edwards, who, I mean, I think has a really good chance to be heard from here this season. I mean, I do think trying to figure out, are you a running back ensemble team? Are you a running back that's going to give a tandem of backs, a whole bunch of carries? Figuring out who needs to get the most carries and giving those carries to that guy. I mean, I think that's an important decision for Del McGee, Todd Monken, Kirby Smart to make, but clearly there are a lot of good options there, whether it be incoming freshmen who we've heard a lot of praise for the last couple of days, or a guy like Dejon Edwards or whatever else. All right, let's see what else. A lot of good comments kind of rolling in here on that. We'll get some more of those here in a moment. Let me go back over to YouTube and talk about the YouTube folks here for a moment. Kirby's Visor says, I can't believe that BA's picking Florida over the Utes. Look, here's the thing, y'all. Just don't be surprised when it happens is all I'm saying, is that a lot of these Florida folks are going to try to sell you of, look how, look at what Billy Napier's doing, totally transforming the team. This is an SEC team playing in its home stadium against a team from the Pac-12 traveling 2,500 miles to get here. Florida's supposed to win this game. So all I'm doing is simply trying to set up the right level of expectation. When they do win, I don't want to hear a bunch of gloating on their side for doing what all SEC teams always do, which is dominate non-conference foes in the early portion of the season. And, yeah, playing in their own stadium, even for as banged up as Florida has been and eroded as a program that Florida's become, this is a game they're supposed to win. It is. Now, I'll be agreeing with Thomas Tyson here. I'll be cheering for the Utes. No question about that. But no doubt who you're cheering for. But in terms of a prediction standpoint, You got to, and like, this is the one way, like, I guess I try to show a little bit of objectivity in that I want to get my picks right. Now, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I'm going to base my picks on what I think is actually going to happen. And while I'm actually not fully on the record with this yet, too. So let's not back me into a corner either. Some of y'all trying to. Let's not back me into a corner on this yet either. All my point is, come game week, don't be surprised when Florida is favored. I believe they will be. And don't be surprised if they do win the game, because I believe they should. DMar42 says he'd cheer for the Russians before the Gators. I know where you're coming from on that. Howard Eubank says, look at Arkansas versus Texas last year. SEC plays tough at home. Yeah, there you go. Foster Moss says, have a great weekend. Drink plenty of long drinks. You better believe we will be doing that. No question. That's on the agenda. On the agenda, indeed. Let's see what else. We'll get some more comments here. Jonathan Aaron says, do you feel it in the air as I do that it's only a few more days till kickoff and I smell a hit of fried gator in the air? A little hint, he says, of fried gator in the air. Yeah, I think that's I think you're on board with that, Jonathan. I think you're right, indeed, that you can start to feel it getting a little closer. There's just a good buzz going right now, and that's great to see. Green Soldier says, I think that Branson gets a lot of carries this year. We're going to see a healthy rotation back to back to back. Well, I know this, and Green Soldier, I think you'd agree with me, that Branson's as popular as anybody, and as popular as any player from any position in the 2022 class. I would say that, he's got a level of popularity just because of the vibe that he gives off that kind of puts him in pretty good class with anybody in that running back room right now. There's no doubt that Branson's going to have a huge, level of fandom with a lot of folks around Georgia, and you may be right. You may see a lot of him here. Jay says, I'm not answering the hard-hitting questions. What are the hard-hitting questions, Jay? What question am I not answering? What did I not answer? Let's see what else. Chase White says, I think Andrew Paul's going to be better than Branson Robinson. That's a great opinion because, obviously Branson's gotten way more attention, and we'll admit around here we've given a lot more of that to Branson ourselves. But listen to the coaches the last couple of days. They've certainly talked a lot about Andrew Paul in particular. And I thought Dale McGee had some great stuff on Paul, which we'll get to probably next week. Frank Patterson says we have to get AP and Branson more carries than normal because we could have two leaving. It would be the least amount of experience coming back at running back since Kirby's been here. That's an interesting idea. I also think that Frank's comments, I've sort of noticed this. About 90% of Frank's stuff is related to running back because he's always like going back and forth with G. Grace about Georgia versus Alabama running backs. So much the same way that Jay Shipes, all his comments are about Texas A&M. Frank's comments are about running backs, typically speaking. I've kind of noticed that. But the point here is that actually is a pretty good point, is you do want to have, some seasoning for that young talent if you do lose those guys here after this season. And, ultimately the job is to get productivity out of that group. And I would like to see a little bit more rushing productivity this year than last year. I would. Last year it worked out to the tune of a national championship, but I think there's more you can do there. I think you can get more of those 10, 15, 20-yard runs. I think you can get – I'd love to see this team average 6 yards per carry, whether that's, 4 guys getting a lot of touches, 2 guys getting a lot of touches. I just like to see that. Frank Patterson says 94% about running back, 6% jabs towards somebody else. I like that. That's a good ratio. Good ratio. Spencer Clark checking in on a burner account about landing some top wide receivers. Yeah, I think that that's obviously a big thing for UGA. And I think it's easy to understand, why, certain guys might have a little bit of hesitation there. Clearly you want proof of concept. Why does Georgia dominate tight end recruiting? Because you've got a great tight end. You've had one that you've used, and it's very easy to explain to another tight end why you can be the next one. At wide receiver, you haven't had that big breakout yet. Now, as Todd Monken kind of pointed out yesterday, well, what if George Pickens doesn't get hurt? Well, you see what he's doing in Steelers training camp right now, that he probably would have had a very big year for you a year ago. And maybe this idea of when is George going to have a breakout wide receiver? Well, maybe that would have been last year too. And all of a sudden, a Georgia offense that was very, 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 very good could have been even better. So maybe a lot of this is just sort of the bad luck that comes because of some injuries. But, you know, the lack of that proof of concept at wide receiver has, you know, clearly been a challenge for the program to address. I don't think anybody just denies that. Jonathan Aaron says if we beat Bama again this year, 1, does Saban retire? And 2, how much room on the wall for another Al the Elephant, which is great. I love the idea of that big trophy hanging on the wall. And, you know, I also like the idea that, you know, Kirby could send Nick Saban into retirement. I think he possibly could. I mean, I don't think Nick Saban's going to have a very high tolerance for not winning national championships. I think they all think they're going to come back and do this year. You know, they bounced back in 2020 to win the title after losing to LSU in 2019. I think a lot of folks around Alabama think it's just going to happen that way again this year. But what if it doesn't? Let's see what happens after that. I think that's a really good point. Jay says, do I stop and let Scully wash my car en route to Orlando like I do? He says, support this community. Listen, I do love that community. Wait, is the Jay? Did Jay drop his last name in YouTube? Is that breaking news? Did he get a new a new commenter name? Maybe that is the case. Let's see what else. Over here on Facebook, Barry Watkins says Saban's ego can't take another loss, but he's going to lose several games this year. I mean, I think you're probably right about that. I think the ego would be bruised by all that. I also think you just get annoyed with your own fans. It's like no amount of national championships will stop them from wanting more and being upset if they don't win one this year. Because, like, the way a lot of Alabama fans kind of go back and forth with a lot of you, that's the same way they kind of go back and forth with everybody. They've got a lot invested emotionally in the idea that Alabama is just supposed to win the national championship. If they lose that, there's a lot of unhappiness that kind of creeps in because of that. And, you know, I think that Saban has had an intolerance to that before, and I believe he'd probably have one again. I absolutely believe that Nick Saban could. I mean, I think that he's trying to gear up for a big final run. That's one of the reasons why they cut so many corners as a program these days. But I think he's gearing up for a big final run. But if it ain't coming, if it doesn't happen this year, you know, you're about to lose Bryce Young. I mean, is it going to get better at quarterback for you after losing Bryce Young? You know, if you sort of wallpaper the entire house with transfers, I mean, like at a certain point, you know, I don't know. Let's see this. Matt Rugavina says, did I see Roman Harper on College Football Live asking how we were going to stop Bo Nix? That guy and his terrible takes. Yeah, that's not a good take. I don't know that I've formed an opinion on Roman Harper as an analyst yet, but that's not a good take. Bo Nix played Georgia 3 times. And, like, the number one reason why I said I think that Georgia shuts out Oregon that day is because if Bo Nix, the primary quarterback, he's barely scored against Georgia in 3 previous instances against UGA. That it's just not likely to happen for him against the Georgia defense. It's just not. So I didn't see that, but that was his take. That's a bad take. Also, Matt was asking about watching Georgia game at Disney World, and I got a great Twitter comment. And I love that the audience just kind of gets the thing around, sort of gets the joke around here. He's like, BA, you missed the perfect chance to tell him that there's a Marlowe's Tavern right there on International Drive in Orlando. So I responded back and said, I wish I would have been that smooth and just saying, hey, there's Marlowe's Tavern right there down the road on I-Drive. But that is indeed the case. I would also say that if you're looking to stay inside the Disney bubble, what's the bowling alley called? I forget what the bowling alley's called right there at Disney Springs. That might be a pretty good place to go watch a game there too. I was thinking about that a little bit. That's a pretty good place. Maybe. John Foster says, "Oh my gosh, it's the Jay Shipe Show. Is this the new segment?" Hold on, I read one comment from Jay. I read one, and I'm not even sure it's Jay Shipe because it didn't say Shipe's in the last name. Sometimes John is hard on me. John drives a very stiff bargain around here. Brandon Griffin says that his girlfriend asked if I lost weight. So it's funny you bring this up because I was doing this thing. I might put a video out tomorrow. I've been working on a video behind the scenes, and when it comes to stuff like this, I'm not super techie, so I'm not always very good. But I was going back and looking at a bunch of old video as a way of kind of getting ready for this. Like, I was blown away by how fat I used to be, and it's like when we get to our 2000th show, I'm probably going to do this because it's just crazy. It's like if you start in 2016, we started the show. I was really pretty skinny. August of 2015, into 2016, I was really pretty skinny. At one point in time, I was probably, around that time is just about as skinny as I've ever been. So, and it makes me look really young. Like if you go back and look at me from when this show first started, now we weren't on video when the show began. So these are like just pictures of me from a tailgate or like one of our early post-game shows or something like that. But if you go back and look at like the earliest days of DawgNation Daily, I am skinny. It makes me look much, much younger. And then as the years passed, I just blew up, man. I was heavy. And I guess I sort of knew it, but I don't know. Listen, I'm a big eater, right? I'm always going to battle my weight. It's just always going to be a thing that I sort of deal with. I like to eat. I like to eat, like drink, like to, consume things. I'm just big. I have a very big appetite. I'm a man of appetites. And, sometimes that gets the best of you. And so I'm going back and look at these old shows. I'm like, it's like, oh boy. So thank you for noticing. I have lost weight. And, you kind of gain some back during kind of the off-season time of the year because you're kind of living the off-season life. And so around 4th of July, I get very serious. And, I've been kind of that's my version of summer camp or fall camp. That, like, come July 4th, summer's over, get serious, start eating the same thing every day. And that's kind of me getting kind of down back to my playing weight. So, Brandon, thanks for noticing. I appreciate that. And to your significant other, thank you for noticing there as well. Let's see what else. Steve Schaffini says, free food's the peril of the sports media. Bill Sanders saying that there as well. That is true. And that's why you have to be in like the right mindset related to all that. Like SEC Media Days, one of the SEC's big sponsors is Dr. Pepper. Well, some of y'all know I love Dr. Pepper. And they got the fountain, like they have the fountains installed at SEC Media Days, and the Dr. Pepper's just flowing. Y'all, I could drink that by the gallon. I could. And they have the Diet Dr. Pepper too. And I don't mind Diet Dr. Pepper, like the Dr. Pepper Zero, but it doesn't taste as good in the fountain form. Like in the fountain form, you want like that syrupy, sugary, fully leaded. You want the real deal. But I forego it. I did not have any. That's the thing. Barry Watkins says portion size. I'm not really a portion size guy. I'm just not. Like, there's a certain point, and I promise we'll get back to football because I know people are going to just lose their mind that I'm talking about something else for 90 seconds. But there's a certain point in life where self-improvement meets self-acceptance, and you have to sort of understand certain things about yourself to be the best version of yourself. And so here's the thing I've understood about myself. So this is 2017. So I actually first of all, that's a great find. That's me live in Los Angeles. We were doing this show at 7 a.m. local time. I was waking up. Now, I wake up pretty early every single day, but to be on the air at 10, is that right? 8, 9, 10, yeah. So we're doing this show 7 a.m. Pacific to be on the air there. So that's us in Pasadena. And I actually got heavier than that over the course of the next couple of years. That's January of 2018, December of 2017. So I actually got heavier than that, but also kind of cool to see us there in L.A. That's a young dude right there. Not as much gray hair, whatever else. But the point here is, now we'll get back to football for a couple more minutes. I just sort of realized about myself, like, I'm not portion control guy. Like, if I eat one thing, I want 90 things. If I drink one thing, I want 90 things. Like, Like there is no like, oh, that's enough. Oh, I've had plenty. Couldn't do any more if I wanted to. There is no whatever part of the brain that makes somebody say, "Woo, boy, I've had enough." I don't have the "woo, I've had enough." I don't have that. I always want more. So I'm either all or nothing. I'm either on vacation mode, I eat and drink whatever I want to, or I'm in like work mode, and I have to be very, very strict because I really can only operate on those polar extremes, and that's just the way it goes. Let's see what else. And we'll get back to football because people will be mad as fire. Spencer, I should say, DMart42 checks in to say culture and development of your roster throughout the season matters. Not our fault. The 4 true freshmen we took, he says that we took to the plains, put them away early, and Bama had to play starters for almost every full game. Yeah, I mean, in all the discussion of rebuilding year for Alabama, young players, this, that, and the other, I mean, I've had a few people tell me this, and it is just so true. Georgia's biggest plays in the fourth quarter of that game were all made by very young players, in a couple of cases, outright true freshmen. That's just what Georgia did. And so culture and development for Georgia does matter. And this is going to make the Bama fans mad, but I do believe this to be true. Alabama is still a better program than Georgia is. There's a reason why it's preseason number 1. A lot of people just believe certain things about that program, and the success they've had, including beating Georgia head-to-head, is part of that. Alabama is still a better program than Georgia. I think that Georgia, although it sits underneath Alabama as a program, I'm pretty sure that Georgia has a better culture than Alabama does right now. And if Georgia overtakes Alabama, that's the reason why. And if it doesn't happen, if Alabama wins this year and if Kirby sort of stays stuck in that kind of one national title club, then maybe I was wrong. Maybe the Bama culture is better than I give it credit for. But y'all, the Bama culture just does not look perfect to me right now. You had a lot of, stuff last year, like Ajay Hall, who, by the way, I guess, not doing great there at Texas either, based on some news reports the last 24 hours. When you're going out and getting a bunch of transfers, there's just something culturally at Alabama that doesn't quite seem to be what it used to be. And as a Georgia fan who is lucky enough to kind of, get a chance to see this program up close and personal, I couldn't be happier with the Georgia culture. I really couldn't. And, yeah, you'd love to score 50 points a game. You'd love to have every 5-star wide receiver. Maybe one of these days they'll have that too. But the one thing that Georgia clearly has going for it is they have a superior culture. I would say right now even superior to Alabama. And that is a big reason why the Dogs won last year. Let's see what else. On Facebook here for a moment. Brandon Griffin says Saban making excuses drop him below Kirby in a lot of people's eyes. This offseason's been, and we did this as a topic of the day, and this is as genuine as I know how to be. This has been a very unusual offseason for Saban because in previous years, you've never really seen him get any kind of criticism at all. There's been a lot that's been said lately about the 2013 Iron Bowl because I guess it's a topic in the book on Saban that's coming out. Back then, Saban was getting some criticism from time to time. But once they kind of got it going in 2015 and then won again in 2017, Saban has kind of distanced himself and sort of made himself appear to be, the unquestioned greatest coach of all time. And sort of since that's happened, any kind of criticism of Saban at all is kind of hard to find. This offseason, a lot of people did not like the excuses, not just Georgia fans, but a lot of people in general didn't like that. A lot of people did not think that Saban came across looking very good and is dust up with Jimbo Fisher. Some people don't like Fisher, but Saban got plenty of criticism for that too. In fact, Greg Sankey recently said it was actually the Saban part of this that caused Sankey to have a lot of sleepless nights because he sort of knew it was the wrong thing to do. This has been an offseason where I think there has been a little bit more eyebrow raising and tough questions about Nick Saban in a way we have not gotten in quite some time. John Foster also welcoming back Steve Schifini. It is good to see Steve in the comments section. I feel like, some of our good friends we don't see from time to time, but it's good to have them back. Miriam Corbin. What did Miriam say? Let me see if I can find Miriam's comment here. I was going to try to find Miriam's comment. I had to scroll back up and see it. Somebody responded to it. Now I can't see it. Yeah, she says I mostly drink water, but when I want something with taste, it's Coke Zero or Diet Ginger Ale. So there you go. Yeah, my wife loves Coke Zero. I love Coke National Championship bottles. Jacob O'Neill getting ready to check out. Steve Schaffini says he wishes he could still hang out here every day, and we'd love to have you, Steve. You're a great commenter. Miriam Corbin also on 285. Yeah, that never gets any better. It doesn't seem like. Wayne Kirkland says when it comes to Nick Saban, who is 70, Father Time is undefeated. Yeah, I mean, that's a fact. Now, first of all, I mean, I don't mind telling you, I think that, Saban obviously still keeps himself in good shape and good health, and I don't mind telling you that. Certainly, I hope to be in as good a shape as he is when I turn 70. But yeah, eventually it catches up to all of us for sure. All right, final comments, DawgNation.com, then we got to go. Let's see our final things here. Aaron Guthrie says Oregon's having offensive line issues. Well, they're clearly replacing a lot that they've lost here as of late. But that'll be a big story towards that game for sure. Randy Hall predicting Tate Ratledge as a second-team All-SEC. That could be good news for the Dogs if that's true. That could be very good news for the Dogs if that is true. G. Greg's Bama boy in here going back and forth as per usual. One of our commenters, it's a very funny username, says Oregon has a secondary issue there as well. Yeah, I mean, look, I think Oregon's a top 20 team. I don't believe they're a top 10 team, and I don't believe they can hang with Georgia. They may do fine come Pac-12 play, but I don't believe that Oregon is among the 3 or 4 most likely teams in the Georgia schedule to compete with and challenge Georgia. I don't think the game's going to be close at all. I really don't. Now it's going to earn a lot of TV attention because of when it's going to be played. There's actually fewer marquee Week 1 games than we've kind of gotten used to this year. But I think this is one that a lot of folks are hoping is going to be a good game, but I don't believe that Georgia's going to cooperate. With that said, we've got to go. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews Cooldown today. Y'all find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. They'll get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. That is always a good thing. Also, check out the AJC online, ajc.com. Braves getting ready for the Marlins. Falcons continuing their training camp. A bunch of stuff going on here in the city of Atlanta, state of Georgia. You follow the election stuff, things like that. We don't talk about that here, but the AJC covers that for a living, and they do it well, very well. So read that online, ajc.com, for a lot more on that. And we will see you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.